Welcome to another training segment on the Couple Checkup. This section will cover providing feedback to a couple after they have taken the checkup. My name is Dr. Peter J. Larson. I'm a licensed psychologist and a co-author on the Couple Checkup. So you'll notice the tagline on the website says relationship assessment, discover, share, and grow. And really those words have meaning. The discovery aspect is taking the assessment and starting to become aware of your strength and growth areas. The share component has to do with getting couples talking, getting the dialogue opened up so couples can begin to converse about their relationship. And the grow part then, of course, is hoping to see couples make some change, some growth, develop some skills that will help their relationship be more equipped for the future. A quick review of why we do the assessment. The feedback and the skills training is very important, but all of that grows out of the assessment. The assessment will help a couple and a facilitator identify strengths and issues rapidly. It's a very efficient use of time. If you were working with a couple without an assessment or an inventory, you may find that it took several hours of discussion and interviewing time to really understand what their strengths and growth areas are. The other thing is it is personal. It gets the couple's attention. As I've said before, there are a lot of good programs out there. There is a lot of good curriculum, but that can feel like very canned advice. I remember a story. My uncle was a smoker, and he smoked for decades, and he claimed he could not quit. Well, so many times a physician had told him, you should stop smoking. It's bad for your health, bad for your lungs, all sorts of risk factors associated with that. But it was never personal. It was just recommended advice. One day, not long ago, he saw an x-ray of his lungs, and there was a dark spot on one of his lungs, and the physician was very concerned that this could be an indication of a pretty serious disease attacking his lungs, and he was afraid it might be cancer. Well, guess what? My uncle quit smoking that day because it was no longer just good advice. It was personal. The assessment, in this case an x-ray, got his attention, and he found that he was able to muster the motivation to quit. Well, in a lot of ways, that's what a couple checkup assessment can do. It takes something from just being good advice to something that is about you personally, your relationship. Here's what your spouse or your fiance is saying about this relationship, and here's where the two of you have some strengths and where you have some issues. That motivates the couple to really start talking about their own relationship. They can no longer just deny things or say it doesn't apply to them, and it gets their attention in a way that it leads to behavior change. So we want to use the assessment as the springboard into the feedback process. This is another screenshot of the view results page, and you can see at the bottom there are two links for the discussion guides. These are the extended workbooks for couples. There's a church-based discussion guide with biblical references, or the standard discussion guide. And all it is a quick click, and the couple will get access to the PDF file for the discussion guide. Of course, with the PDF file, that can be printed, saved, viewed online, used in any number of ways. The goal of the discussion guide, some of the goals are to get a couple talking, thinking, and providing some insight into their relationship. So there are certain topics that are going to be much more insight oriented, as let's say they're talking about their expectations for parenting, or they may be thinking, reviewing their spiritual history and talking about the families they grew up in, thinking about leisure activities and the kinds of things they like to do or don't like to do, what can they do as a couple. A lot of those are just discussions, and there's not necessarily a skill associated with them. but they're still very fruitful discussions that increase their understanding and awareness of themselves and one another and how these issues might impact their relationship. Skills, on the other hand, the discussion guide has some very specific skills-oriented exercises around communication or conflict or finances, and those are also highly important. Now, one of the goals whenever you're providing feedback to a couple is that your feedback should be balanced. In other words, we mean, for sharing the issues and the growth areas, you also want to talk about some of their strengths and resources and give them a nice balance of feedback whenever possible. This will help couples receive the information more readily. It's not helpful just to look for all the problem areas and focus so much of your time just on the negatives, because all relationships have some history at least that brought this couple together. At some point they were in love, felt good about things. They have some resources and strengths that allowed them to form that relationship. So you want to tap into that as well and highlight some of those things. Have the word flexible stages written down. And one thing that's kind of interesting about learning to use the couple checkup is that while the inventory itself is highly tailored to the relationship stage, customized for dating, engaged, or married couples, it's going to be tailored based on the family structure or their living situation, kids or cohabitation or step. So there's a lot of personalization that takes place in the assessment side. On the feedback side, what's pretty interesting is that you can give communication exercises or finance exercises or conflict resolution, and these very same exercises can be used with couples at different stages. So you don't have to learn a different or new feedback process for an engaged couple versus a married couple. Now it's going to feel different. There'll be some nuances, and you'll need to work on those exercises in a different way with couples. For example, if we're teaching communication skills to an engaged couple, well, very often they have not had many arguments. They feel very positive and optimistic. They can learn that skill rapidly, but the very same skill with a married couple who's had a lot of conflict, it might take some more work to teach them that skill. They've had some poor habits form potentially. They have some hurt or negativity they may be holding on to, so it's often tougher going for them, and it might take 2 or 3 times to review that exercise and really get them to buy into that. So it's the same exercise, the same kind of feedback process, but you'll work with it differently. Finally, the discussion guide is filled with lots of exercises. We're going to look at the table of contents in a second, but you won't be able to cover every exercise with a couple during your meeting time. So feel free to assign some of them as homework that couples can work on their own between meetings or after you're done with them. Some other considerations in giving feedback. Multiple sessions are good. It's not enough to meet with a couple just one time, go through their results from their assessment, and think that you're done. While that may help them somewhat, research has shown that the more time you can spend with a couple, the better. So for premarital couples, very often folks are meeting 6 to 8 times. In some states and some programs, they're even meeting 10 or 12 times. If you have that kind of time on your hands, that would be wonderful, because you're really going to be able to help a couple dive in on their relationship and make some great progress. With married couples, especially if they're struggling, you expect to have to meet longer and more often with them than you would with a premarital couple. Change is tougher. Change takes some time, especially if there's poor habits that are ingrained. It's not to say you can't use the checkup in a retreat setting or in a class where you're covering lots of material in one day. it's just harder for the feedback to really take hold in that setting. You're going to have to count on the fact that couples are going to digest a lot of material and apply it after the fact. So multiple sessions is good. You can also use the checkup and these exercises in a group format. We have a leader's guide that we'll talk about in a little while that you can download from the website and use this with groups of couples as well. The discussion guide as well as the reports can be broken up and handed out page by page. If you're doing a session, for example, on communication, you may not want to hand out the whole discussion guide. You could give that couple just the relevant pages for that meeting. Now, of course, that would require that as a leader or a facilitator, you've gotten a copy of the discussion guide and made some printouts of that yourself. And we'll talk about how you can do that in a minute here. As I mentioned before too, there's multiple versions of the discussion guide that's translated into several languages, and there's also a biblical version with scriptural references included on the topics, or a standard version without that. Finally, we're going to talk about when do you refer. If you are a pastor or a lay couple, a mentor working with couples, there'll be times where you realize this couple has some pretty serious problems, and we're going to want to talk about in the feedback process when and how you might make a referral to a professional counselor if needed. Here is a screenshot of the table of contents for the discussion guide. You can see the first exercise is an introductory exercise that is designed to highlight their awareness of their strength and growth areas. Then we move into communication, conflict resolution, financial management, leisure, sex, and roles. You can see there's multiple exercises on communication, conflict, and finance. This means if you're covering that session with a couple and using the discussion guide, you may do one or two of the exercises as you meet with them and then assign another exercise or two as homework that they can do in between meetings. Spiritual beliefs, expectations, children and parenting, closeness and flexibility, personality, and then a final wrap-up exercise on setting goals for yourself, your relationship, and your family. You'll see as you look at the discussion guide that in several instances there are alternative exercises within a topic for premarital versus married couples. So when it comes to parenting or sex, these topics have sections that couples can look at from a premarital perspective or from a married perspective, and they're just side by side, and you can apply those as needed based on the stage of the couple you're working with. Now let's talk about a typical feedback session with a couple. Remember, they would have taken the couple checkup at this point and had access to the discussion guide. Still, you may want to make your own copy of the discussion guide and ask the couple to either forward you a copy of their results or bring a copy of their checkup report so you can look at that as well as you're giving them the feedback. Now, a typical feedback session is going to cover a certain topic or two, so you might, for instance, say, well, we're going to cover conflict resolution in this session. And you would first spend some time connecting with the couple, reviewing homework from the previous week if that was relevant. But then you're going to want to get into the topic and introduce the fact that you're going to spend some time on conflict resolution in that week. If you're in a church-based setting, you may want to share some of the teaching or philosophy around that subject from your religious perspective or from a social science perspective. And you can find lots of great information actually in the Couple Checkup book, where there's lots of research and information on each of these topics. The next piece of a feedback session would be reviewing the assessment results. Now, it's important to do this first because you're going to be getting that couple's attention. You're going to be making it very personal. Before you move right into teaching them a conflict resolution skill, you want them to be in tune with the ways that their relationship is reflecting that skill currently. Is it a growth area? Is it a strength? Is it a possible strength? Where are they at, and what are the things that they are highlighting as needs in their relationship? Once you've reviewed the assessment results with them, you can bridge into the exercises and have them begin to complete the exercises with you. A good example is the 10 steps for resolving conflict exercise. Reviewing those steps, picking a topic with your couple, having them start to move through those 10 steps in your presence will be a great exercise. You may not finish the whole thing in a 60 to 90-minute meeting, but you could assign them the homework of completing the rest of the 10 steps at home between meetings and then review to see how that went for them. There's also some other conflict resolution exercises you could assign for homework. Reading the piece about taking a time out or seeking and granting forgiveness are great homework exercises. Once you've seen the couple work on the exercise or practice the skill in your meeting with them, you can give them some feedback, make some observations. Again, do a little bit more teaching on the topic. At that point, you'll wrap up, maybe assign them homework. If you're in a faith-based setting, you might close in prayer. Lots of latitude here with how you want to run the session, but this is a common flow for working with couples in a feedback process. Here are some of the core exercises out of the discussion guide. So if you didn't have much time to work with a couple and you didn't want to try and cover 15 or 20 of these exercises, here are 6 exercises that are powerful, research-based, proven exercises that have shown to get good results. So starting with sharing strength and growth areas, working on their communication by using the wish list exercise and teaching them assertiveness and active listening, 10 steps for resolving conflict, creating a budget in the finance section, mapping their relationship in terms of the closeness and flexibility piece, and finally looking at their personality similarities and differences. These are easy one-page exercises in many cases, but they're powerful and they really get couples thinking and growing in their relationship. Let's look at one of the exercises specifically. This is a communication exercise called creating a wish list. And I've got a screenshot. I've broken it into a top half and a lower half of this page. The whole exercise here is on one page, and it seems quite simple, but it's very powerful. It starts by explaining what assertiveness and active listening are for the couple, and then asks them each to take a minute and create a wish list of 3 things they would like to see more or less often in their relationship. Now you'll have the couple take a few minutes and work separately on this so that they each have their own wish list. They're not doing this together as they brainstorm their list, but then you'll bring them together and have them begin sharing, taking turns sharing their wish list with each other. Here's the bottom half of the page. There's 2 speaking skills you're training here. One is assertiveness and one is active listening. So the speaker's job is to speak for themselves and communicate what their wish list is. It's great if they can use some I statements, I wish or I hope, and then describe also at the feelings level, how would that wish feel if it came true? That's important that they get some of their feelings on the table as well. That's assertive. It's assertive to say what you really think, what you want, and how you feel about the situation. Now the listener's job is to repeat or summarize what they're hearing and describe the wish and how their partner would feel if that wish came true. The listener's not responding or reacting or defending that message in any way. They're simply reflecting what they're hearing. And then it'll be their turn to become the speaker, and their spouse or fiance will become the listener. It's highly effective exercise. It sounds simple, but there's a lot of things going on here. You get to see their process unfold, and you'll very quickly learn how assertive they are, how good they are at listening, and it will stretch a couple on these exercises and skills. And then after they're done, there's a couple of just wrap-up questions. How did it feel? How effective were they in working on these skills? And again, you can assign them homework to do this at home. Even if you've done this with them while you've met, you can say, hey, I want you to continue practicing assertiveness and active listening with some various topics during the week, and get them working on refining these skills. There are some free resources I've alluded to that are on the Couple Checkup website. There's a leader's guide, there are some small group study guides, and there's a place where you can download the discussion guides in that PDF format ahead of time. So if you want to have copies on hand for your couples or for a group as a leader, you can get those ahead of time. If you go to couplecheckup.com or catholiccouplececheup.com, you'll see up at the top there's a Group Leaders tab. It says for group leaders. If you click on that tab and scroll down the page, you'll find several links for these free resources. And again, they're mainly in a PDF format, so you can just download them right then and there. There are also some books, the Couple Checkup book and the Remarriage Checkup book, that can be really helpful if you want to have a more in-depth process with your couple or with a group. You can assign chapters for them to read, or you can use this as a resource yourself. If you're going to be covering the topics, whether it's communication, conflict, finance, spirituality, personality, any of these topics that we've looked at, the checkup books have chapters on these topics that talk about them, talk about what the research says, talk about what the assessments typically show, and there's even some extra exercises and activities for couples in there. So this would be a great way to acquaint yourself with that content and think about what you want to teach and equip couples with. Now, we did talk about when to refer. Just a quick reminder here. There's a difference between professional counseling, mental health, licensed mental health professionals, and those who are doing more of an educational or ministry process. So if you're a pastor, a mentor, a lay person who's doing more education or coaching, you'll want to know, hey, when is this really getting serious and moving beyond my expertise? Certainly if you start to hear about abuse or suspect abuse happening in that relationship, it's a good time to make a referral. There are domestic violence hotlines you can call. If you know a professional counselor in your community, you can have a quick conversation with that person and talk about potential referrals. If you don't know a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist in your community, go ahead and search for one. Get someone in place that you trust, that you know, that you can make a referral to when you need to. Another issue would be substance abuse or addiction. That just wreaks havoc on relationships, and that person is going to need to seek treatment for that substance abuse issue if you're to make any progress with them on their relationship. So they may need to be in their own 12-step program or treatment process. It doesn't mean you can't continue to invest in that couple relationship, but you won't make much progress if that is going unchecked and not dealt with in the relationship. The same is true of a psychological disorder, and I realize many of you aren't trained as psychologists or as therapists who can diagnose a clinical disorder, whether it be bipolar, anxiety, depression, or something else. But you may notice that there are times where the person is just not responding in what you would expect a normal process would look like. You're going to hear about behavior. You're going to hear and see behavior as you sit with them that if your radar starts telling you something's just not right here, that may be a good time to make a referral to that professional counselor to help diagnose and deal with any individual clinical issues that might be affecting that person and then subsequently affecting that relationship. Fourth issue is ongoing infidelity. It is so detrimental to the relationship, and it's hard enough to recover from an affair, but if that affair is not over, it is really, really difficult to make any progress with a couple when there's this third party that's kind of lurking in the background of the whole situation somewhere. So again, making a referral for that couple would be important at that point. If you need some help making a referral or finding professional counselors in your area, you can go to prepareenrich.com, and if you click on the Find a Facilitator link, you can search for counselors by zip code or city, and that may be one way to make a referral. Any professional counselor who's been trained in Prepare and Rich would very quickly understand the couple checkup results and find that the assessment itself would be helpful to them in their work, and they would help you get a release to transfer a copy of that checkup so that the couple's results would be available to them as well. Thank you for tuning in and thinking about how to give feedback to couples and what some of those issues are that surround this topic. Thanks very much.